Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City of Casa Grande study session. It is Monday, May 20th, 6:30. We'll call the meeting to order. And we have tonight a presentation and discussion relating to short-term rentals. So, Mr. Raines?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to make the presentation and have discussion on short-term rentals. And I know the mayor and council is very familiar with short-term rentals as a definition. Companies like Airbnb, VRBO, and the like. A couple of years back, the state legislature elected to establish statutes giving cities the opportunity to build some consistency in various ordinances and the like governing short-term rentals. And so I know the mayor and council had indicated prior, I know many of you have received some of the same emails that staff has received related to creating a short-term rental ordinance and the process that goes with that. Tonight, I've got Mr. Rob Aldis will be making a presentation providing a bit of a background and some of the options that are allowable by state statute. Our hopes are that we ultimately will get some direction from the mayor and council on whether you would want us to continue to pursue an ordinance in an effort to have a process for registering these short-term rentals and the like. And Rob has done a fair amount of research. He's evaluated the ordinances that have been passed by some of our neighboring communities, and we'll go over that information this evening. And so with that, he'll go through his presentation and we'll entertain any questions and directions at the end of the council meeting, at the end of the study session. So, Rob.
Thanks, Larry. Today, for this presentation, we'll be going over the background to short-term rentals, a little bit more detail. We'll talk about the regulations and more specifics, like Larry talked about, what's allowed in state statute. And talk about some options for the mayor and council to consider and give some feedback on, as well as the management process and the associated costs that staff have identified for a process to follow here in the city should we can continue with an ordinance. And then offer a recommendation and then have some time for questions at the end as well. So by way of background, there are approximately estimated 110 short-term rentals in the city. Now, it's a hard number to nail down because we haven't done the work to actually identify it, but that's what a couple short-term rental software companies have given as a ballpark of what we might be looking at right now as a city. And this creates two different opportunities for the city at this time to establish an ordinance with the ideal outcomes being, one, some increased additional tax revenue, because right now at this time it's unknown if all the short-term rentals are paying the taxes that they should by law, either because, one, they might be trying to avoid it, or two, they might just simply not know and be aware of what's required. And then second, the other opportunity be to regulate any problem properties that there might be. We can all hear horror stories of other cities where there's been some short-term rental that's caused some chaos. So be intended to get ahead of that. And the goal of this is not to create more regulation or to impose more upon the citizens. It'd be more instead to create a good community, make sure the revenues that should be received are being received, to then be able to give back to the residents. So that would be the goal with all of it. Now, state statutes pretty specific as far as what is allowed, where it's framed in more terms of the city cannot regulate short-term rentals except within this box that it then outlines. And some of those items are some prohibitions that cities can put on short-term rentals, such as making sure that all existing ordinances are being met with and that there are no non-residential uses, as you can see outlined in these bullet points. Some other regulations that are allowed by statute are to demand the contact information of the property owner and also the emergency contact for the property. And the emergency contact can be the property owner as well, or it could be someone else who's local that can respond if there is some kind of event. So then that way people can contact someone for the state of the property. There can also be compliance with tax laws that needs to be proven by property owners, as well as neighborhood notification. What that means is the properties immediately surrounding the short-term rental will be notified that it is a short-term rental. So that way, if something happens, they know the process that they can follow. They can also, cities can also require that the permit numbers are posted on all websites like Airbnb or VRBO. So then that way, it's a very clear distinction about what property this is. And then there can also be a mandate for sex offender background checks on all potential guests, and this would be done by the owner of the property. And then lastly, there can be a requirement for $500,000 of liability insurance. So that encapsulates the regulations that cities can impose. Now, to touch on the permit briefly, this formalizes the process, you could say, much like a business license, where there are certain bits of information that can be received, such as the name and contact information for the property owner and also for the emergency contact, the address of the property, proof of compliance with tax laws, such as a TPT number, so that way it can be audited later to make sure that the taxes that should be paid are being paid, as well as an acknowledgement to comply with all different laws and regulations relating to short-term rentals, and then a permit fee, which can be either $250 or the cost of issuing the permit, whichever is less. We'll touch on the costs here in a little bit. But as far as permits go, the only grounds to deny a permit are set in statute, and they are if there's an incomplete application, if there are unpaid permit fees, if, say, someone has one property that has a suspension, and then there's another property that they're trying to get a permit for, that fact that they have one suspension can be grounds to then deny the permit for the second. There's false information, or if the owner is a sex offender or has been convicted of a serious felony in the last 5 years, those are all grounds to then deny a permit. Now, as far as suspensions are concerned, cities can suspend permits for up to 12 months, and there are two main categories that can cause such a suspension. First, if there are 3 verified violations of the ordinance. However, the statute specifically calls out that they can't relate to aesthetics or garbage disposal or parking. It has to be something unrelated to those items. There has to be 3 of those, or 1 verified serious violation, which can consist of a felony offense committed in the vicinity of the property by the property owner, or some sort of recklessness resulting in injury or death, knowingly housing a sex offender, or allowing certain types of non-residential or illegal activity. Now, suspension must be done through an administrative process, the statute says. However, the statute doesn't specify what that process would have to be, and so that can give the city some leeway as far as what that process might look like. And if there are violations, there are fines that are allowed in statute. And the first violation you can see is up to $500, or the amount equal to 1 night's stay, and it's the greater of the two is the cap. So say if there's a property that charges $800 a night, then that can be the cap. It doesn't mean the city has to charge the full amount, but that's the limit. Then the second and third violations go up considerably. And then another penalty that statute has allowed is if a property refuses to give the emergency contact information for the property, the city can fine up to $1,000 every 30 days until that information is received. And 2 more notes I want to make on the statute for short-term rentals. First is that municipalities have 7 business days after receiving a permit in order to be able to either issue or deny a permit. It puts a little bit of a shot clock on there, so to speak. As well as if there is some kind of a citation or a violation at a property, then the city has 7 business days to notify the property owner as well. So then to take a look at some management practices that other cities, or the things that other cities have included in their short-term rental ordinance. You see here a list of cities that all have a short-term rental ordinance and all have some sort of a similarity to Casa Grande, and this is the group that we've used to analyze what they might be doing. And you can see that there's some different approaches taken. Cities like Marana or Oro Valley have essentially every regulation allowed in statute, all included in their ordinance. It's kind of the maximum regulation, you could say. Whereas Prescott Valley, on the other hand, only requires an emergency contact and a statement saying that all regulations will be met and there won't be any illegal activity. So kind of a wide spectrum, but you can see the numbers along the bottom show the frequency with which different provisions, you could say, are being used, with the permit required, emergency contact required, and neighborhood notification all being the most common, with things like guest background checks or liability insurance being less common, for example. Now, by way of a process to regulate, there were 4 cities that responded to requests for more information on their process. And by and large, the vast majority manage their short-term rentals through the business licensing arm of the city, kind of in tandem, side by side, because there are a lot of similarities. And the primary department enforcing was the code enforcement division for each of these cities. Each of these cities use short-term rental software, which we'll touch on here in a minute. and each of them charged a permit fee ranging from $60 to $250. Now, for short-term rental management software, there are companies that have developed software for this very purpose to help cities and towns regulate short-term rentals. And there are three main purposes the software can aid cities with. First is to identify and track short-term rentals within the city, where it's often difficult to identify because what might be on a listing today might not be on a listing tomorrow, or it fluxes and changes constantly. Where a lot of these softwares use data mining techniques or web scraping to identify any short-term rental that has ever existed. So for instance, say there's a short-term rental that only is operational 1 month of the year. It'll identify that it comes up every year and be able to mark that on the map as a short-term rental. The next thing that can happen with the property software is to send automated messages to the property owners. So in that way, it's not something where staff have to send emails and to follow up. It can be done through an automated process, essentially saying details about the ordinance, about what needs to be followed on the part of the property owner. And then the third aspect to short-term rental software is it can provide an online platform, so then that way the property owners can just click a link and go right to the platform and be able to enter everything in rather than having to send a PDF form, have it be hand entered later. And it can just simplify the process. Now, many of these short-term rental software companies can have it more customized where it doesn't have to be all three of these. It could be part or some. And so that would be something that we could take a look at going forward. Now, for options for mayor and council to consider, there are three main approaches that staff have identified. The first being the balanced regulation approach, and this is where kind of follows the middle of the road perspective compared to the other cities, kind of takes the average of all of them, specifically requiring a permit number, a TPT number, a designated emergency contact, requiring that all neighbors are notified, does not require a permit posted on all advertisements, it doesn't require liability insurance or a guest background check, does require meeting the STR regulations and ordinances, and also prohibiting any residential or non-residential or illegal activity. It includes in the ordinance fines and the potential for suspensions to help give it a little bit of teeth, and then would use STR software as well. STR being short for short-term rental, of course. The maximum regulation approach follows that of Marana or Oro Valley and takes everything that's allowed in statute and puts it in the ordinance to give the maximum ability to regulate, with the minimum regulation approach being a more simplified approach, where it's just the permit being required, a TPT number as well, and designated emergency contact without any of the other requirements. Now, for some pros and cons for each of these options, the balanced regulation approach is beneficial because it allows the city to regulate short-term rentals, but also is intended to not create an undue burden on residents, to also try to strike a balance between where the best return on investment is for different requirements. The downside being that it isn't the maximum regulation approach. The pro of the maximum regulation approach is that it does provide every single allowable regulation and statute, but the downside being that it could potentially overburden residents with requirements that might not be absolutely necessary for the community. And then the third, the minimum regulation approach, the benefit is that it provides a lot of flexibility and less demand on residents, but then the downside being that it doesn't have teeth, you could say, to actually enforce the regulations in the same way. As far as the management process that staff have identified that would be used, this process will be managed alongside business licenses as well. It makes the most sense to have it in that location, with code enforcement being the division that would enforce the ordinance here as well. The intent would be to use software just because it creates a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness that then would be less time taken by city staff that could then be spent elsewhere. A permit fee would be imposed, which we can touch on in a moment. And I mentioned that. So as far as a process, the first step would be to identify short-term rentals, say through the software, contact the property owners. Applications will then be submitted, and finance would review and then approve these applications. Our public safety departments have requested that dispatch be notified as well of short-term rentals, so then that way, say an officer is responding to a property, then the officer can be notified by dispatch that it's a short-term rental, so they can have that awareness going in. And then this process would also require that each permit be renewed annually, since it would be in need of annual renewal. And then it would just continue on in perpetuity throughout the life of the short-term rental. Now, related to costs, options 1 and 2 are anticipated to cost the same. Very minimal staff time, with the lion's share of the cost being the short-term rental software. I will note with the 17,750 figure that you see for the short-term rental costs, that is an average between 2 different preliminary quotes that we received from 2 short-term rental companies, one being about $12,000, the other being closer to $24,000. And so that number could vary considerably depending on the software platform that the city would go with. And option 3 would not have that cost, but would have a lot more staff time involved. It would be a lot more burdensome on staff by way of hours and also personnel costs. And just a reminder that these costs can be passed on to the permit owners, to the property owners, but it does not mean that the full cost would have to. The city could elect to, say, set a flat fee of $125 or something like that to recoup some of the costs, but then eat the rest of it as part of the process. So the recommendation that the staff have for the council is to adopt the balanced regulation approach if an ordinance is to be pursued, with the 3 main goals of providing a means to regulate, with also not creating an overburdening impact on residents that are trying to make some side income with maybe a spare room or casita that they might have, while also being able to make sure that action that needs to be taken can be taken through the ordinance, and also that all applicable taxes will be collected to be able to then be used to benefit the community as a whole. And that marks the end of the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well done, Rob. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Well done. And thank you for, Larry, thank you to staff, and I know Rob's worked hard on this, so this looks very good. Anybody have any questions for Rob? Yes.
A quick comment. I kind of look at this as a business license because they're running a business. So
Right.
that's an easy way. And then I like the approach that you took because I did not agree with the insurance requirement, because we don't require other businesses to have insurance. You know, it'd be required through their own
Yeah, through their
standards.
homeowners or whatever.
And then you answered the other question. And the neighbor notification is one thing. Like, it's just a notification, right? It's not like a hearing or anything.
No.
It's like,
Correct.
so
No.
just so people are aware, right?
Yeah, just
Just
the
so your
adjoining
neighbor
properties.
And what is it? Just the
I think
immediate?
I think what it allows us to require the short-term rental person to give their contact information to their neighbors.
Is it just like immediate, not like a zoning case?
Correct.
The statute actually requires essentially neighbors who are immediately adjacent as well as diagonal across the street.
Be notified.
And behind? And behind too?
It did not specifically, unless Brett. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing too, let's say there's a fire. Well, if there is a fire, then we know who to notify, right? You know who to get a hold of, and I think that is probably fire and or disturbance are the 2 biggest things, and I think covering our costs. We're not in this to make money, so I mean, yes, a side benefit is that maybe they'll pay for some rental tax, which would be nice. But I don't think the permitting fee should be a moneymaker. So if our cost is 181 and charge 185, I don't know, something like that. But I'll kind of leave that up to staff, what you guys recommend. I don't know that we're here to just make that decision, or maybe we will at some point in time.
Discussion.
But yeah, for discussion, Lisa?
And yeah, your point on, the cost, the software cost of 17,000, I mean, in the end, if we don't do it, and if the staff time is
Right.
way more than that, I think that investment is going to be good, especially as short-term rentals continue to grow, it seems like, and so I'm glad we're on top of it. I had no idea there was 110 in the city limits, which kind of surprises me, but as we get bigger and bigger, it's going to be a more appealing place for people to stay. So, but no, great. I'm glad we're on top of it and having this discussion tonight.
Bob?
Yeah, I don't know if I misunderstood, but is the requirement for identifying sex offenders, is that on the guests as well?
So that would be on the property owner. They would need to
Just
perform
on the
their
owner.
own, with the side on the side being if the say the VRBO or Airbnb website were to perform one of those, then that would meet that requirement.
I think the balanced approach that you had identified doesn't require that, though.
Right,
Correct.
balance is-
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Because that seems a bit of a burden
Yeah,
to
that
have
would be
to
tough.
have, run every customer that you have through.
And you don't,
Yeah.
you don't give all the guest names, do you, on most of those? I don't know.
No,
Not at all.
no, you don't
So
get
that
all
would
the
be
guests,
tough.
the initial person, I believe,
just the
that's
initial.
Just the
sign
person
off
renting
on
it. Yeah, so you don't know the other 3 or
Yeah.
4 that might be in there, so.
That'd be hard to maintain.
Mayor, and I agree, Bob, when you brought that up, because it sounds like a really good idea for the sex offenders, but the reality is, how can we really do that? And 4 out of the 10, did not do that. The question I had, because we mentioned code enforcement, and we know it's an automated system, but is more the staff would be administrative type things that deal with the software? I mean, I know that we have a lot of people that feel like we always need more code enforcement for other things. So, I wouldn't want this to take away, even though it's an automated system. So is it more of an administrative position? Whoever would be covering that, like administrative assistant, or would it be one of our code enforcement officers?
Are you referring to the management of the short-term rental software? That would be done through the business license administrator
Just
in the
strictly,
finance
okay.
department.
Okay,
And that's when it can fluctuate. We're not sure exactly that number.
Correct.
Range. I think
Right.
it was 17, but it could be higher.
And there'll probably be
and
somebody
lower.
in financing too,
Yeah.
okay.
from an administrative standpoint. Bob?
Could you kind of walk us through, say we have a group of residents, 3 or 4 or whatever, that complain about a particular short-term rental? Say there's too many people there, large groups that are loud, too many cars parking, and they want to get rid of it, they want to control it. What is that process that they would go through to make that happen?
I'll give an initial thought, then I'll turn it to Brett if he has any additional perspectives. But unless, based on how the statute's written, from my interpretation, unless they are directly violating the statute or the ordinance, and it's a violation, then there's nothing that can be done because it's a lawful allowable use. But
private property.
See if Brett has anything else.
No, thank you, Rob. I think that's correct. The way the statute is written is not a neighbor-driven process. The notification is really just to make sure that the neighbors know what's going on and have the contact information in case something is going on so that they can try to address it. If there are verified violations, which requires an adjudication of guilt in order to be a verified violation, if you have 3, as Rob said, within the year, then the license could be suspended and they wouldn't be able to do anymore. So those ones that you do have problems with, that you can confirm and, convict, you would be able to suspend. But otherwise, it's not a neighbor-driven process where enough neighbors object, we can't just remove the license
Okay.
for that or turn the license down for that.
Okay. But the current residents, the direction we would give them is if and when you have a crime, disorderly conduct or whatever it is, call law enforcement and they will, or they may, take enforcement action. And if that happens, that's one violation.
Right, if they're convicted of that.
Yes,
It is
okay.
one violation. But anytime that there's a criminal one, obviously, we recommend that you call the police. Non-emergency line if it's not an emergency, but otherwise, make sure if it is an emergency, you call 911. And any violations that are health and safety related, if there's a traffic violation where somebody parked too far over on the curb, the statute actually exempts those out and said, look, we're not here just trying to paper you to death. They're health and safety violations, but noise isolations, disorderly conduct, those will count.
Yeah, this ordinance or whatever this process we're going to try and put in place is not to take away the property rights, right? I mean, it is not about us trying to take their property rights away. If you own a piece of property, you have the right to do with it what you will. And so it's meant to more have a process in place that allows us to keep track so that if there is an emergency, there is a situation that we know who to contact and we know how to handle it. Okay. And it's really for that main purpose.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can just add on to that, just for the benefit of the mayor and council and the community, I will tell you that when we met with our public safety professionals and had the dialogue, there's nothing that's driving this to the forefront. Now, obviously, we are like, if we respond to a call today, we may be uncertain that it's a short-term rental. Right. But ultimately, there has not been any issues that we have identified as a result of somebody owning a short-term rental. To your point, this is, in essence, we have 110 today that's being estimated. We've heard numbers somewhere between 100 and 150 by various vendors along the way. This gives us an opportunity to be ahead of any type of growth in that particular industry, and ultimately giving us the information that we need to have, number one, a better point of contact from the city's perspective, and number two, for the residents that live around some of these properties to understand what is transpiring in a specific location.
Great. Anybody else have any other questions for Rob or Larry? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, just, I know that Rob provided a recommendation from staff at this point that will allow us to go back and begin to craft an ordinance for council's consideration. Obviously, we'll be working on a proposed rate, which will require a process as well, a proposed fee. Is the mayor and council's direction for us to move in the path of the recommendation?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I see all nodding heads.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll stand adjourned. We'll reconvene at 7:05. Give us a couple minutes. Presbyterian, oh, that's Paul.
Paul
St.
Timothy.
Peter's Episcopal.
Oh, I know it's that. That's your church. Good excuse. I'm in Coolidge. Oh, okay.
He did get married in Coolidge.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was there.
Y'all made it safe and we're back.
That's right. That's right. And is the business going okay too?
We're still working on that one, right?
All right, good evening, everyone. It is 7:05. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for the City of Casa Grande. We'll call the meeting to order. Our first orders of business are our invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. So please remain standing. Tonight we have Father Sean Rutledge from the St. Peter's Episcopal Church.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send down upon those who hold office in this city the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all the people of Casa Grande. And Heavenly Father, in your word you have given us a vision of that holy city to which all the nations of the world bring their glory. Behold and visit, we pray, the city of Casa Grande. Renew the ties of mutual regard which form our civic life. Send us honest and able leaders. Enable us to eliminate poverty, prejudice, and oppression, that peace may prevail with righteousness and justice with order, and that men and women from different cultures and with different talents may find with one another the fulfillment of their humanity. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge. We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Anthony. All right, let the roll call show that all members of the council are present.
So noted.
And next we have considering our approval of the minutes, several minutes.
Mayor McFarland move that we approve of the minutes of the council regular meeting of May 6, 2024, as well as accept the minutes of the Industrial Development Authority meeting of March 1st, 2023. Consider also accept the minutes of the Arts and Culture Commission meeting of April 2nd, 2024. Accept the minutes of the Arts and Culture meeting of April 16, 2024, and accept the Casa Grande Police Personnel Retirement Board minutes April 18, 2024, and accept the minutes of the Arts and Culture Commission meeting of April 23, 2024.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Next is our claims against the city, D1.
Mayor McFarland, I move to accept and pay the claims dated May 1st, 2024 through May 14th, 2024 as presented.
Second?
I have a motion. Can I have a second? Oh, I got a second.
Got a second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the claims are approved. Next is our meeting agenda approval. Larry, any changes to tonight's agenda?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have no changes this evening.
Any changes from council? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve it as it's presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, meeting agenda is approved. No special presentation tonight. We do have consent agenda items, so all items listed with an asterisk are considered routine matters and will be enacted by one motion and one roll call vote of the council. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or member of the public so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence of the agenda. Does anyone have anything you want to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, anybody from the public? All right, seeing none, then
Mayor McFarland, I would move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember Huddleston.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. I was just getting a little worried, Gloria, because this was like page 3 of 432. It was going to be a long meeting tonight.
It's all the attachments.
Okay. All right, next is our item H, which is our call to the public. So this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. I would ask that if, as you come forward, you don't have to have filled out a comment card, but if there is anyone here who would like to address the council, this is your opportunity. Would ask you to give your name and address so we know where you're from. And please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and remember that it is not an agendized item, so we cannot comment on it. Is there anybody here who would like to address the council? Okay, seeing none, then I will close the public comment, and we'll move on to, I think, item L. And L1, this is our public meetings, public hearings, open records review, and closed records reviews. And we have a couple of public hearings here tonight. First one is item L1. Larry? Or Mary Ellen?
Hello, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're here to discuss or have a public meeting for the program year 2024 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. The Annual Action Plan is used as a tool for implementing the City of Casa Grande's 5-year consolidated plan. The primary purpose of HUD programs is to develop viable communities by promoting integrated approaches to providing decent housing, suitable living environment, and expanded economic opportunities for the low to moderate income people, households in our community. Staff is recommending that the Mayor and Council adopt the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 2024 Annual Action Plan as being presented tonight. CDBG national objectives benefit to low to moderate income persons, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and meet a need having a particular urgency. Here's a map of our low to moderate income neighborhoods in our community right now. This is based on census data. So most of the programs either have to serve the low to moderate income individuals, or they can serve an area that's listed here on the map. We had estimated our CDB allocation this year to be $462,638. Unfortunately, we received less. Our allocation is going to be $434,580. Part of the process for the annual action plan is we have to hold 2 public hearings. We held the first one on February 28, 2024 at the Mondo Anaya Center. We had 4 people in attendance. We discussed various items such as eligible activities that the CDBG program can fund, and threw out ideas and which programs are working for our community and which ones they want to see changed. It was just discussion. Of course, then the application process was open from February 29th through March 26th. And from April 10th through I can't speak tonight. Through May 9th, the public comment was open for the community to focus, to read and give us any feedback on the annual action plan as we put it in draft form. We did not receive any comments. What the committee is recommending to you tonight is that the allocation remain, we're going to fund the same programs that we funded last year. Of course, it's at a reduced rate. We have the Opportunity Tree. They have a new program called Supported Employment, Expect, Develop, and Support Services for $7,100. Seeds of Hope, the Angeles de Esperanza program, which is their Senior Connections program, is $15,896. Community Action Human Resource Agency for their Casa Grande Homeless Services, $14,405. The Boys and Girls Club, the Len Cola Club Membership Scholarship for $4,437. Against Abuse, Housing and Support for Abuse Victims, $17,138. and Casa Grande Police Department for their homeless outreach team for $6,211. There is a maximum that we are allowed to allocate to public services, which is 15% maximum, and we've met that here. The rest of the funding is being recommended is the City of Casa Grande Public Works Department for the sidewalk and ADA improvements on the east side neighborhoods, particularly on Brown Avenue, for $103,534. Continue the City of Casa Grande Community Development Owner-Occupied Housing Rehabilitation Program for $103,533, and to continue the City of Casa Grande Planning and Development Enhanced Code Enforcement Officer at $75,410. And also the City of Casa Grande for administration, again, we're limited, we could do 20% maximum at $86,916. I would like just to highlight some of the current programs that we're funding. The Opportunity Tree, this is their supportive aging program. They are going to change to an employment model next year if funded. We also have code enforcement. I think everybody was aware of 4th Street. This is the before pictures, and these are the after pictures. And again, that meets our low to moderate income area, so that's definitely been funded through this program. The Boys and Girls Club will continue to fund the Lancola program. And then I have to highlight our owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program. This was a current project or recent project that we completed. You can see how old the home was, and then some during pictures. They had old cement kind of piping and sewer, so we had to replace all of the sewer lines, and this was the completed project. We're really happy with that project. That's all I'd like to present tonight. If you have any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Lisa?
Thank you, Mary. I can't believe we're here again. It seems like
I
we're
know.
going so fast, right? So I know you said the application process was open the February 29th through the 6th, and it looks like we're funding the current organizations, agencies. Were there any additional applications that came in? Okay.
No, we posted it on our website. We posted it in the newspaper. And then, not in the newspaper, I'm sorry, just the annual action plan, but we do post it on our newspaper. And then I bring it up in all the public meetings that we attend, and if anybody wants an application, I send it to them.
Okay.
Yeah, most of those agencies are probably the most active agencies in town, so
Right.
Right.
they tend to be on top of it.
Absolutely,
So,
yes. Okay, thank you.
yeah. And then the home rehab, I was at the last one. It's quite amazing, the rehabilitation that is done for some of these homes that were basically not livable before. So,
We're really doing a lot more, it seems like, in the east side. We have, we're doing another one on Coolidge Avenue, the same model.
Okay.
So that one should be done by the end of June. So I'd love for all of you guys to come out and see
Yeah.
it. It's going to be really nice.
I've been there.
Yep. And then we'll do another one on, we're doing a minor rehab project over on the west side.
Okay.
And we'll be finished with that one here in the next couple of weeks.
That
Yeah.
one is looking really, really good. That's next door to my church.
It's
So I
really
found out
looking
about that.
nice.
It's really nice.
Well, you might have to come and see the inside when it's
Yes.
completed.
Most definitely.
Any other comments or questions for Mary? Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so no more comments from council. Then I'll open the public hearing to anyone here in attendance that would like to address item L1. This is for our approval of resolution number 5648, which is adopting community development block grant annual action plan for next year. All right, seeing no one, then I will close the public hearing and we will call for a resolution. Please, Gloria.
Resolution number 5648, a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Casa Grande, Arizona, adopting the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 2024 Annual Action Plan.
Mayor McFarland, I move to approve resolution number 5648 as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember Huddleston.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. All right, next is item L2. This is also a public hearing. This is amending zoning ordinance 1178. Mr. Gagliardi?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So the item in front of you this evening is a request to rezone property known as the Town Site PAD. This property is part of the Roping Ridge annexation, which was recently annexed into the city of Casa Grande. Roping Ridge is comprised of approximately 218 acres. Now, previously in front of City Council, you had entertained both the annexation and initial zoning designations of the Roping Ridge annexation. As you see, most of these 218 acres were zoned urban ranch because that was the most comparable zone district to what it was when it was in the county. It was general rural. But there were a few other properties within the annexation area zoned differently. You notice the yellow area off of Peart Road, that was zoned single-family residential R1. And then towards the northeast corner of the annexation area, there was 31 acres. And within those 31 acres, there was an R3 piece and a B2 piece, because those were similar to how that property was zoned in Pinal County. A few months ago, you did approve the Peartley Point PAD. That was for the acreage that lied west of Peart Road. That particular PAD allowed for light industrial along the southern portion with two different densities of multifamily towards Early Road with a commercial area at the hard corner of Early and Peart. This evening, we're talking about another rezone within the Roping Ridge annexation, and that's the area outlined in white, and it is proposed as the Town Site PAD, and that's what we'll be discussing this evening. It is a 31-acre site, and proposed is a 31.4-acre area for multifamily use. That would be replacing the area that's currently zoned R3, which is multifamily. And it is proposed at 24 dwelling units per acre, which would yield up to 320 units. They are proposing up to 4 stories at 55 feet in height. And then the remnant, the area that amounts to 17.69 acres, labeled storage on this plan, is the area that's currently zoned B2. And that would accommodate RV, boat, and self-storage uses. Now, both the B2 zoning and the R3 zoning could remain as is. In theory, the R3 could be developed for multifamily, and the B2 could be developed as self-storage and RV storage. For the self-storage, there would have to be a conditional use permit considered. But what the PAD does is it allows a little bit more flexibility with development standards. It would allow the storage to be a use by right within this zone district, and it does give some flexibility to the R3, what is currently zoned R3 in terms of the height and number of stories. I like to digress just a little bit. The reason why this site is called Town Site PAD is it sits within the town site of Arizola. It was platted in 1892, and one of the founders was named David Thomas, and he had a daughter named Ola. And so when naming the area, he wanted to call it something with Arizona as inspiration. But he also wanted to provide something that memorialized his daughter, so he swapped out Ona with Ola, and that's why it's called Arizola. So back to business. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I never knew that one. I didn't know her. That's a trivia question.
Exactly. I'll quiz you later. One of the One of the submissions with this PAD was a conceptual layout, which is really helpful. Sometimes PADs do not provide as detailed of a conceptual plan. Of course, what you see on the screen here will ultimately be replaced and finalized by the submittal of a major site plan, should this zoning be approved. But this helps identify how the applicant intends to lay out buildings and how the proposed development standards can be met within the respective acreages for the self-storage, RV storage area, and for the multifamily area. Within the multifamily area, they are proposing 12 multifamily buildings. As I mentioned, there would be up to 320 units. They're conceptually proposing 88 one-bedroom, 208 two-bedroom, and 24 three-bedroom units. There would also be a clubhouse and other open space amenities. Within the area to be known as Citadel at town site, which would be the RV, boat, and self-storage areas, there's a mixture of storage buildings that are 12 feet tall, some open RV and boat storage areas to the south, as well as some covered RV and boat storage areas. And there would also be an office and an accessory dwelling unit for that storage facility towards the north end of the property. When reviewing PADs, these are the criteria that have to be evaluated and supported in order to recommend approval. And I just want to go over the highlighted criteria with you real quick. The first is the interrelationship to the plan elements both on and off the property. If you look at what is surrounding the site, both in terms of existing and proposed, it's in an ideal location for the uses and standards that they are requesting. Immediately to the east of the site is about a 16-acre area that was acquired by APS. And on the consent agenda this evening, you actually approved its final plat. APS is intending an electrical substation at that hard corner of Arizola and Early. So this site will not have neighbors to the immediate east. And then to the west of the site is more of the Roping Ridge annexation area and a portion of the south as well. Immediately to the south and southwest portion of the town site PAD is the Nolan Dairy, and it's currently zoned urban ranch, but it was part of the Roping Ridge annexation, and likely that urban ranch zoning is going to be just a holding zone. It's highly likely that within the next couple of months we'll see a rezone request for that property. None of this area south of Early within the Roping Ridge annexation area has certificates of assured water supply. So the types of uses that we're going to be seeing are those that aren't requiring of a certificate. So probably you'll see some commercial uses proposed, institutional type uses, and maybe some type of residential that doesn't require multiple individual lots. Then Early Road serves as a significant buffer between the town site and the developing Carlton Commons neighborhood on the north side of Early. There has been some concern about the applicant's request to go up to 4 stories in height, and that is probably the most significant compatibility concern. But the back of the lots within the Carlton Commons neighborhood to the proposed multifamily building locations is a distance of 240 feet. That's because Early Road currently sits as a 55-foot wide half street, but at the time of development on the south side of Early Road, there will be an additional 55-foot right-of-way dedication. So you'll have 110 feet worth of roadway or right-of-way. And there's a significant setback from the backs of the lots within Carlton Commons and the north side of Early. There's a pretty large landscape tract. And similarly, the applicant is proposing a 75-foot setback for the apartment buildings from his property line. There'll also be a 6-foot to 10-foot wall bordering 3 sides of the PAD. Along the frontage will likely be a pony wall that will be about 3 feet in height. And then there'll also be some landscape buffering as well. The other area of concern is along the south boundary, because along the south isn't entirely the Roping Ridge annexation. Towards the southeast is the Carlton Commons neighborhood, which does have certificates of assured water supply, and they are in the preliminary platting stage for single-family homes. So there is some sensitivity between the single-family homes and this PAD, but the way they arranged the land use is that area is abutting the storage area. And there is a development standard within the PAD guide that no storage of vehicles or equipment taller than 10 feet is allowed along the south border within the first 50 feet. So that helps provide some buffer between the backs of the single-family homes that may develop in Carlton Commons and the type of storage that will occur on the other side of their 6 to 10 foot wall. With regard to conformance with the general plan, this area sits within the neighborhood's land use category. Within neighborhoods, it says that commercial development is allowed on sites up to 30 acres, which their commercial site falls well under. It's at 17 and a half. And it also says that no more than 12% of neighborhoods' land use within 1/2 mile can be commercial. When doing the buffer around this site at a 1/2 mile radius, there is some area that is commercial, and that's within the Peartley Point PAD at the hard corner of Early and Peart. But when factoring the amount of acreage allocated for that with the amount of acreage proposed for commercial within the town site PAD, you have 5.3% out of the allowable 12%. So that is met. And then with regard to multifamily, the general plan allows a maximum density of 24 dwelling units per acre, and that is what they are proposing is a maximum of that density. And then also the maximum site size for properties with over 12 DUs per acre is 20 acres, and this site also meets it as the multifamily area is about 13 acres in size. And then the other criteria of the general plan is that no more than 20% of the neighborhood's land use within 1/2 mile can be for multifamily. And when running that analysis, about 4.7% out of the allowable 20% is utilized when factoring that within the Peartley Point PAD, there was a multifamily area that falls within that 1/2 mile. Changes in zoning classification have to meet the land use needs of the residents of the city in order for it to be considered in conformance with the general plan. And of course, here we are this evening discussing more multifamily. So we do have to take a look at whether multifamily at this location is appropriate and how it speaks to the housing needs and supply study that has been recently presented in front of Council and Planning Commission. And it is worth reminding Council that housing needs and supply study did determine that the city does have an adequate supply of multifamily. However, staff does recommend approval of this multifamily land use because it's zoned R3. It does already allow multifamily at the density that is being proposed within this PAD. It's just simply this PAD will give it some additional development standards that the R3 zone wouldn't have that level of flexibility to achieve. And then multifamily in this area will add to a housing mix and diversity amid a lot of the planned single-family dwellings in the area. That is kind of a bittersweet, I guess, because a lot of times people think that multifamily and single-family uses should be segregated as much as possible. And in some ways, yes, that's true, but our general plan also strives to have a mixture and diversity of housing types. And I think the best way to achieve that without creating a compatibility issue is making sure that there are some standards in place that bolster the compatibility. And I think here, the fact that there's Early Road to the north, which will ultimately be designed to the same standards, I think Cottonwood Lane, that's also a minor arterial of 110 feet wide. And the fact you have APS immediately to the east and uses to the west that are not single family, I think that the multifamily here does help add to the diversity without creating a compatibility issue. The other criteria I want to talk about is the impact of the plan on existing and anticipated traffic. So at the time of the major site plan, should this PAD be approved, the applicant will be required to submit a traffic report, and that will assess the number of trips that are proposed to be generated by the uses. And it will also take a look at the roadways that are used to serve this site, and if that trip generation impacts the level of service of those roadways to an extent that it puts it to an unacceptable level. In order for the major site plan to be approved, the applicant would have to propose methods to improve those roadways or modify the intensity of the use to where the roadways are no longer at an unacceptable level. And as part of development, there would be roadway improvements required for Early Road and any other roads that are seen to be affected to an unacceptable level. Exact driveway placement on the site will be determined at the time of the major site plan. However, the conceptual layout does provide for some flexibility in providing some alternative driveway locations. That's also important in terms of flow of traffic and how frequently cars are pulling off the road to get into or onto properties. The PAD proposes a parking standard that matches the city parking code for storage and multifamily uses. So that will follow the city code and it is determined to be adequate. With regard to the public notification process, the procedures met what's required by the code. There were notices mailed out to owners of property within 300 feet, and I had not received any inquiries or comments. I do believe City Council did receive some correspondence from a resident at large that that had some concerns about the multifamily, but as I mentioned, I think with the 240-foot separation, staff was able to make a recommendation to Planning Commission to support the PAD in its entirety. At its April meeting, Planning Commission did vote 5-2 to forward a recommendation to Council to approve the rezone of this R3 and B2 property to the town site planned area development, subject to the following condition, and that's our standard condition regarding right-of-way dedication, and that would apply to early, should we need Early Road right-of-way prior to when we would ordinarily get it, which would be at the time of building permit. We would have the ability to seek that right-of-way earlier. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. Go ahead.
James, I have a question for you. I think recently we've approved 5 three-story apartment complexes. And I guess I was under the assumption there was only 3 stories because that's as high as they could go. This one's 4 stories, 55 feet. Is there a different standard? I mean, shouldn't the other 5 have asked for 4 stories too?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lavender, as a PAD, they do have the ability to ask for an alternate height. I think in some of those other multifamily requests that were in front of you, if they were in PADs, they would have had that same ability to request it. I think whether or not we send the applicant down that road in requesting a greater height is going to depend on what is in the surrounding neighborhood. In this case, because of what was surrounding it and the amount of setbacks, we were comfortable with supporting that request. If it were a traditional R3 zone, 35 feet would be the maximum height, which would accommodate up to 3 stories.
Are you concerned that we're kind of opening the box now and we're going to see more requests for 55 feet?
Well, I think it's going to be case specific. I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot more multifamily requests come in organically as it is. However, a lot of the ones that we've pre-approved either through zoning, I'd have to check to see what their entitlements are, but I would imagine a lot of them have their height already stipulated, and so if they went to amend the PED to increase the height, we'd have to look at what was motivating that. And if it was to increase the density, we probably couldn't support such an amendment. In this case, the density is not changing in terms of what they'd be allowed to do as an R3 property versus a PAD. But I think the applicant who is here tonight would be able to tell you some of the reasons why he's thinking 4 stories, what its particular advantages might be. One is as a 4-story building, the building code automatically requires an elevator. And so that would definitely be a perk, because most apartments that are 3 stories or less don't require elevators for multifamily use. So even though it is at a greater height, it does have a convenience that would be an amenity that doesn't exist in other residential products.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Bob?
James, has there been any discussion about additional school sites down in this area?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Huddleston, yes, in fact, the city often meets with the school district land planner, Tom Wallaber, and he has been identifying areas, and they do have a map of locations nearby where there's either agreements in place or areas that they do need to work with that respective landowner to do maybe some type of agreement for a school site. So they're aware of this annexation and the proposed land uses, but to what extent they've looked at putting pen to paper as how many additional students that'll yield, I can't tell you. But they do have it kind of mapped out as to where future school sites should go.
Okay, thank you.
So this one depends too on the major site plan, obviously, as to the actual height and actual everything else that will come of it in traffic. So that's going to be interesting to see, because right now all we're doing is doing the PAD overlay. So we're not automatically saying it's going to be a 4-story building, correct?
That's a good point, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Herman, because really as a PED, it's saying they can go up to 4 stories. At the time of major site plan, they could propose a 3-story development. They just couldn't exceed 4. Also, as part of the major site plan review, we could look at other scenarios where the buildings closest to early stay at 3 and the buildings further back are 4. The PED doesn't go into that level of requirement. It just says the multifamily can go up to 4 stories, but they are providing a 75-foot setback from early. So it's a greater setback than the height of the building. Mm-hmm. So ordinarily you could, in the R3, you could be as close as 20 feet, and that would be for a 35-foot tall building. So that setback to height ratio is expanded quite a bit for this project.
And it's nice to have a pretty good concept drawing that we don't get that a lot of times at this stage, so that helps a lot for people to see what's going on.
Lisa?
I want to go back to the drawing here. So you talked about the requirement for 4 stories. If they go to 4 stories, there has to be an elevator. Would it have to be throughout the whole property? Because it's still pretty spread out. A lot of times when you see a 4-story, they're pretty much, put together. So it will be in all those different buildings?
My understanding, and the applicant can opine on this greater, but any building that has 4 stories or greater would have to provide an elevator. I don't think they meet the code if one of the multiple 4 stories has an elevator.
Right.
But you're right, because I've seen developments up in the Phoenix area that are 4 or more stories, and they do tend to be longer built. I mean, they take up more square footage because if you're putting in an elevator, might as well get a better bang for your buck on that. But the building code probably has some sort of maximum separation from elevators too. So if it's too big, they may have to provide more than 1 elevator. So I'm not exactly, I don't know what all the rule requirements are for that.
And I know what Councilmember Lavender talked about, opening up a can of worms, for 4 stories. And of course, that's concerning for me. I mean, we even going to 3 stories has been a huge change for us here. But I do, the location, and you talk about compatibility, I think the location could be good to have something like this. And I do like when you talked about the diversity of the types of projects, with the RV parking and, what's surrounding that area is something that could be good, beneficial to some of our residents too. So, but I do, I'm really not, I don't love the idea of 4 stories here, but because of the location, could work, yeah.
Donna?
Was there a discussion when we're talking about the 4 stories? The first thing I thought about was the concern for our fire department, and I know that we have, great equipment, and in response to response time in that area, would that cause, was there any discussion that would cause pause on that 4-story and having availability should there be a fire?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember McBride, so fire does look at that at the time of major site plan. However, I can tell you that the buildings, because of the building code and fire code, would be required to be sprinkled. And then in the review of the buildings, it has to have a certain drive access width around the building within so much distance from the building to allow for full coverage of the fire trucks spread of the building during a fire. And as long as they can accommodate for that on the major site plan, they're fine. But the fire department has equipment to accommodate buildings that tall.
And
It's just
503
mostly about
is where the
response
bucket
time.
truck is
Right.
located, which is right up Pert Road, so, in this particular case. 502, I'm sorry, I said 503, 502.
502.
So, okay. Any other questions or comments for Jim? All right, it's a public hearing, so I'm going to open the floor for the public hearing. And again, as a reminder, if you do want to address this issue, please state your name and your address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes, and also understand, keep them 3 minutes. Anyone?
Gloria Johnson Story, 1245 East Laurel Drive, Casa Grande, Arizona. As I did at the Planning and Zoning meeting, I again say, please, no 4-story apartments. We look around and we have all these 3-story apartments, and it's kind of overwhelming. And when you start looking at a 4-story building, and the houses in Carlton Commons are all single-story houses, and it's hard to block out 4 stories. I don't care what the distance, how much landscaping, but I think that we would really be pushing it for 4 stories. And I want to go on record saying, please put a restriction on the 4 stories because it's just overwhelming. I don't care where it is in Casa Grande. There's always single-family homes and people close by. And that's a lot of buildings to put in that many 4-story apartments. Thank you.
Robert, can you open it? Do you need the clicker?
I don't need the clicker, if you could just have where it shows the site plan. Hello, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'd like to start off with a little bit about who I am. I moved here from Moberly, Missouri in 1978. I've been in Arizona the entire time. I started in construction when I was younger. I started buying properties when I was 18, started buying rentals when I was 29. And I would like to just say to the council members and to the citizens of Casa Grande what type of person I am. The way that I like to have rental properties is I like having them very nice. I like treating people very well. I'm going to share a small story with you. I had Greg and Carol Spencer, a mom and an adult son, living together in one of my rentals. They called me up on Friday night in July, and the overnight lows are triple digits. I know for Arizona statutes, I don't have to do anything for these people for 5 days. I told Greg, I said, you and your mom go get a hotel. I thought about it. My AC on that house was 20 years old. It was just a fan motor. Didn't care. I called my AC guy. We put a brand new unit on there. I came and met him at the property with the new unit on Sunday, and I paid their hotel bill. The mom, who was 65 years old, she started crying. She said, David, I am 65 years old and I have rented my entire life and nobody has treated me this well. So the reason for the 4 stories is nothing more. I had it designed as 3 stories. Before APS bought the land, it was 3 stories. But because that homes could potentially went in there, I imposed greater open areas on myself. I imposed a larger landscape buffer, and I held the buildings back, trying to be a good neighbor. But once APS bought that, it kind of opened up. Now we have 3 sides of that apartment complex is going to be commercial or that substation. And then with 250-foot distance to a single story, yes, you can see a 4-story. But if you think about it, a 4-story building, now I am putting 9-foot ceilings in mine, so it's a little bit nicer. But the difference in my building, if you have the foundation and the roof, the difference from a 3-story to a 4-story is 11 feet, which is 2 foot 8 inches taller than my hand. For 2 foot 8 inches tall, 11 feet of view, this is what we get. And I'm saying we as a community, and we're talking about your coworkers, members of your church, anybody who might be staying here, we have less congestion in buildings. We have more parking. We have more dog parks. And, somebody might say, well, you're just doing this because you have less buildings to build. For every 3-4 stories I have, I save 1 roof and 1 foundation, but I install 6 elevators. 6 elevators cost more than 1 roof and 1 foundation. It just does. The only reason I'm doing this is if any one of us had our mother or our father or a member of our church living in there and you had an elevator to go up to your, I don't care if you're on the second floor. Some of us got bad knees. But especially the third floor, hucking your groceries all the way up. And so when I was doing this, designing, some of the things I put in there was 60 garages. Every single garage has a 50 amp 220 charger for all EV cars. I put in like an extra 100 parking spaces. How many New York developers do that? It doesn't line their pockets. They try to pack you in there like sardines. So I really am trying to do this. Now, if we can't stomach to look at an additional 11 feet, you know, for all these amenities, you know, I'm open for whatever you guys suggest. But I'm not doing it to make money for me. I'm doing it to make a really nice product for Casa Grande. My daughter lives here, and anyway, so any questions?
Thank you.
We're good, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other public comments? Mr. Nolan?
I'm Daniel Nell, I have the property to the west there, and I'm basically for it. He's going to put a good 4-story in for elevators for everybody, and I think that it's going to be good, and it don't bother me at all. So, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, then I'm going to close the public hearing, and I will call for an ordinance number, please. Gloria?
Ordinance number 1178.450, an ordinance of the council of the city of Casa Grande, Arizona, amending zoning ordinance number 1178 and its subsequent amendments by changing the zoning from general business and multifamily residential to planned area development on property located generally 530 feet west of Arizola Road on the south side of Early Road, Casa Grande, Arizona.
Mayor McFarland, I move approval of ordinance number 1178.450 as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
No.
Councilmember Huddleston.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. All right. Next is our reports. So I'm going to start to my left. Mr. Lavender?
None. No reports, sir.
Donna?
Quickly, the Kohler grand opening was a great event. We welcome them to Casa Grande. We have the Biz Outlook for the Chamber of Commerce. That was great to have an update on that. And congratulations to Casa Grande Main Street for their annual meeting. They had a good showing, and they shared some of the new artwork, the doors downtown, that were just gorgeous by our local artists. So a lot of things going on in town. Graduations are coming up. I had one of my own with my granddaughter Saturday. I was very proud of her, and wish everybody to have a good weekend and a safe weekend. Thank you.
Pat?
Thanks, Mayor. We had our last youth commission meeting of the year, and we voted on new members, so we'll be seating a new commission, and those names will come forward at the next meeting probably, and for our approval. And it was we had 5 seniors, and we had a nice little kind of ceremony for them, and they got some gifts, and everyone talked about them. It was a neat little thing that we did. Fire Station 503 is taking shape over there. So you can see the curved roof line now. It's going to look pretty neat. And then I did notice driving around the signs for the Courts and Sewer Line Intercept project, kind of telling people what's going on. I love the concept. The signs are a bit verbose. I had to pull over to read it, but it's really neat so people know what's going on. And if you want to know, it's going to tell what's happening. So I like stuff like that, and I know that we're going to start doing more stuff like that, thanks to the manager and PIO department, to get the word out there of what's going on and what we're doing with this money. So, thanks.
No reports. Lisa?
And Councilmember Lavender was a little modest when he said nothing's going on. There's,
I didn't say that.
or you don't have anything to report. No, I just wanted to say, just everything that is going on with our school districts. And I just, I went to the Casa Grande Union Scholarship Night, and it was amazing how there were 97 students that received over $6 million in scholarships. So that's just something that we should be proud of, for all these students to first apply, for scholarships and so many dollars. So I'm just, and that's just one school. So I'm just so in awe of so many of the students there, and I feel good about our future generation and what they're going to do. So thank you for all of that. And then, yes, Kohler, just, again, thank you to all our staff. I mean, this is something that's gone on for a long time, and it's just amazing when I was there to just imagine that company is right here in Casa Grande. I mean, it was just high-tech, the state-of-the-art facility, and to see all those Midwestern people here, excited to be here. It was just amazing, just so proud. And again, congratulations to all of our high school and elementary graduates, and, good things coming, but I hope everyone stays safe. When you celebrate, stay safe. So that's it for me.
Bob?
Mayor, thank you to you and the rest of the council for your patience and understanding and an excused absence 2 weeks ago. Been a rough couple of weeks, but we're getting through it. Thank you.
Good. Feeling better?
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we've got graduation tomorrow night, graduation Thursday, right? So we got
Yes,
Union on Tuesday and Vista on Thursday. So congratulations to all the seniors. Also, I want to send out my big congratulations to Kohler for their grand opening last week. It was, it's an impressive facility. I think they're up to 150 employees now, 200 maybe by end of summer, 400, 500 at build out. So again, good paying jobs, a lot of engineering jobs there. I met several of them that were working on the floor, and we want to welcome Kohler to our community. So. Didn't have a whole lot else. I was in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago. It was a good trip. Got to see a lot of our legislative delegates from Arizona. I got to talk to a lot of agencies like EPA and some others that can tend to be burdensome on municipalities. Anyway, we did have a good conversation with them, and I think it's good to have them see us and to understand that we are a real, organization. There are real people behind the name of the city of Casa Grande. So it's I think it's imperative that we continue to be active in that arena.
Who else did you meet in Washington, D.C.?
Mark Kelly and
5 of my fraternity brothers?
Oh, and 5 of your fraternity brothers. On the roof of the Watergate Hotel.
I was getting pictures.
Matt and 5 of his fraternity brothers
I wasn't
from
there.
ASU. It was a small world story, anyway. Just also an update on single-family building permits. The latest report is out. In April, we had another 77 new permits. That's a total of 258 this year, so it's a 26% increase over last year. So single-family homes continue to be built. As everyone has seen, if you drive around the city at all, the apartment complexes are also continuing to be built. I think the Agave House will be renting by August. And I know I've shared that information with both superintendents, so hopefully they can get that information to their teachers, some of the new teachers that are coming in, because I think some of them are certainly in that affordable housing tract. So that's all I've got. And just want to wish everybody a good evening, and we'll call the meeting